So actually, we have one change of speaker. Maybe Thomas, can you introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, I'm the replacement, if possible, for Mr. Schäfer. My name is Thomas Becker, and I'm from BMW, and I'm in charge of sustainability here in Munich.
Thank you very much. I think this is a very interesting angle because you represent the people that can invest in nature. So let's start with, can you please all consider for a moment, what is the value of nature to you personally? What would you pay for, let's say, for listening to birdsong in the morning, or for going for a walk with your children through the forests? I actually think that from today, we actually should be paying for nature. Our civilized societies have not been paying for the services of nature. We have been living at its expense for decades. And in fact, we've been using it unsustainably and have been causing degradation and destruction. We've been losing half of our forests, half of our coral reefs, 3/4 of our wetlands, and we are leaving 2 billion hectares of land under human use degraded. And clearly the result is a man-made collapse of biodiversity and a looming threat of a global ecosystem collapse. And of course, this poses a systemic risk to global economy. Over half of the world's gross domestic products are moderately or very strongly dependent on nature and the services it provides. Yet our human activity is pushing ecosystems towards irreversible tipping points, undermining global economy and exposing business to ever greater nature-related risks. So, but don't leave, please. I'm stopping now with gloomy facts. I actually believe that mankind is sufficiently creative and innovative we can still get it right and sort it out. I believe that we can become nature positive and net zero, maybe not in 2030, but as soon as possible. And today we're speaking with 4 heroes that are actually at the forefront in tackling one of the greatest challenges we are facing, which is to overcome the current global biodiversity conservation financing gap, which is estimated at an average of over $700 billion that is required on a yearly basis. There's much more awareness on climate change, and about the same amount is already, the private sector is already investing about $800 billion in climate change, but in biodiversity it's about 20 billion. So we need to address this, and we're speaking to 4 pioneers that will make a difference and that are going to inspire you, I hope. Maybe let's start with you, Christof. You are a true conservationist, probably the most experienced in Germany, traveling throughout the world. Can you give us a short overview of the situation?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm the director of the Frankfurt Zoological Society. We are an international conservation organization. We are working in 18 countries, in 4 continents. We are trying to turn paper parks into real parks on long term. Now, so that's the aim and the purpose of the organization I'm representing. First of all, I want to thank every single individual here in that room for being here, for giving us your time for this session. Now, I see quite a lot of empty seats here, and I think you should talk to the others who haven't been here later what you have heard. Now, So we are talking about biodiversity. Biodiversity is an artificial, complex word now, so it's not easy. So just very quickly, that we are on the same field on understanding what biodiversity is about. Biodiversity is the diversity of genes now, and just look left or right to you, and you will recognize, oh, this is also Homo sapiens, but obviously the gene composition is a bit different to your own one now. So we have an incredible variety of genes on this planet, but we have very little understanding of that variety. Then going to the next level of biodiversity is the diversity of species. So everyone thinks, yeah, I know what a species is now. We know about 2 million species, but we estimate the species on planet Earth to be more than 8 million species. So most of the species we don't know. No? And then we come to the third level of biodiversity, and that is ecosystems diversity. So that's the complexity of all the species and the genes diversity interacting. So that is, in a short word, nature and all life on Earth. No? So it's a very complex thing. And then you ask, okay, where are we? And unfortunately, I directly have to dive in again into the doom situation now. So the easiest explanation is we are entering the 6th mass extinction on planet Earth. It is as severe, as I said, in 4.6 billion years, there have been 5 mass extinctions, and we are now in the first one, which is only caused by one single species, Homo sapiens. Now, we know that there are about 1 million species threatened by extinction. There are even new data coming out estimating that number to be much higher, because these researchers looked more on neglected group like, for example, insects. No? So we lose about 100 or 150 species per day. So going extinct, species which have developed in millions of years. So if you go home tonight, no, another 100 or 150 or whatever the estimate is will go extinct on that planet. That is very much linked to the destruction of complex ecosystems with a lot of species like rainforest, coral reefs. No. Last year, we lost 66,000 square kilometers of forest again. No. So that is 1.5 the size of Switzerland. No. And we know, and this is now going to how these crises are interlinked now. So that is about 20% of our carbon offset is just coming out of the destruction of the forest, our treasure chamber on planet Earth now. I assume you all love domestic cats, right? I love domestic cats. Do you know that the body weight of domestic cats is exceeding twice the weight of all elephants of the African continent? So we have completely turned around the life on Earth. About 10,000 years ago, 1%, 99% of the weight of land vertebrates, no, the biomass of land vertebrates, were wild animals. And now we have changed that to 1 single percent. 67% is our livestock and pets, like cats, no? And 32 is our 8 billion people, some with more weight, some with less, no? But together we forming 67% of that weight. And the wild animals are only reduced to 1%. This is how we have already changed planet Earth now. And we are here in a digital conference now. So imagine you have a hard drive, and under that hard drive you have everything, all your pictures, all your videos, all your data, all your passport, all your company, everything now. Everything is on that hard drive. And then you just start to delete randomly on that hard drive now. You have no clue whether you will reach the operating system. What we do is we push the button to delete randomly on that hard drive 24/7. That is what we are doing currently now. So we are deleting on that planet Earth now. And when we would look from outside on that planet, we would see that incredibly beautiful planet now with so incredible variety of ecosystems. these beautiful rainforests and coral reefs and savannas and mountains, all what we enjoy and cherish. No? And what we do is we're destroying it. No? So I would say Homo sapiens, we call ourselves Homo sapiens. I think we might call us in the future Homo smutus, no? The stupid man, no? Because obviously we are not very wise, no, in dealing with the resources given to us, no? So we are in a desperate situation. You said finances is an issue, yeah? You mentioned the 700 billion. We are light years away from that 700 billion. And then I'm finishing on Germany. Germany is currently the biggest investor, I'd say investor, not payer, investor in biodiversity internationally. So Germany pays about 750 million per year, which looks good. No, we invest more than America or other European states. No, but it's tiny. I'll give you a few comparisons. We heard that the Ahrtal flood, 2 days of rain costs the taxpayer in Germany 30 billion now for the replacement of the infrastructure. Now, we are just paying 10 billion of subsidies now for a chip factory in eastern Germany. Now. And the chancellor said 2 years ago in front of the United Nations, we will double our conservation and our biodiversity investments by the year 2025 to reach 1.5 billion. 1.5 billion, that's tiny little for the fourth biggest economy in the world. But we are far away from that, because if you have read the newspapers, the BMZ, the Ministry for the Development and Cooperation, where the most money is going into, will reduce its budget by 800 million this year. Now, so how could you double that? Now, so we have to hold our politicians accountable, but it's clear, and that is what we are exploring now on that stage, is the politicians alone will not do it, the taxpayer alone will not do it. We need the responsibility of the individuals, we need the responsibility of the corporates, and we need a different approach to the economy. Thanks.
So what can we do to overcome this finance gap? Martin, you've advised companies and governments working for McKinsey and Systemics. What have you learned about the reason for the underfunding, and what is your approach? What do you suggest we can do?
Well, Christof is right. Let me not even attempt sort of to add even more color or sort of gray to that picture. We are underappreciating nature. We are underfunding, underpricing, undervaluing. We are underinvesting. The planet, that is 53 billion hectares. That's all we have. It's all we have. That's all our capital. Some economists, please stand up and convince me differently. That's for the foreseeable future, all our capital. Something like 17 billion hectares, that is land, and 12 billion hectares is habitable land. That's where in the past sort of we species lived together in an ecological balance, and that's where now we have a war between one very hungry species and all the others. And that's, by the way, that's also the arena in which we are currently taking $7 trillion worth of business decisions every year, extractive decisions, sort of the oil industry that Sandrine talked about. But it's, by the way, it's also the arena in which we are receiving 2 trillion of subsidies that are encouraging us to extract more and to destroy more. Now, there is also, speaking to Johan, sort of trying to structure this a bit, there could be a way out. If we decide by 2030 actually to manage 30% of the planet differently, that's about 4 billion hectares, regenerate it, restore it, preserve it, then we would create a carbon sink of 8 to 14 gigatons, and we would be able to stop and reverse the essential loss of biodiversity. Now, the economists, and we have run a lot of numbers, actually tell us, and you use that number, 700–800 billion. It's not that much, by the way. We got a lot of it to sort of show me another IRR of that order of magnitude. But that means that we need something like $200 per hectare, which again doesn't sound a lot. Yeah? $200 per hectare per year. Currently, we are reinvesting into the restoration of nature 40, so we are 80% short. And out of that, only something like $5 to $10 is in fact comes from the private sector, and only $1 of that, by the way, are nature-based solutions from carbon markets, and only the 10th of a cent comes from biodiversity credits. What a scandal for now. Now, however, there's something really, really interesting happening. DLD is coming to an end. Let's sort of also create a Sandrine moment and sort of turn this into, we are starting to reinterpret what nature is. We are starting to look at it as what it is, which is critical infrastructure. But critical infrastructure, like any infrastructure, depreciates unless you reinvest. Yeah? Energy depreciates, transport, the same with nature. And so, but people start to see that if they don't do that, there are failures to value chains, failure to economies, failure to societies. And all of a sudden, we see people starting to acknowledge that they're exposed. Food chains, last year we didn't have any oranges from the Mediterranean, did you notice? One of my favorite breweries went bust for lack of hop. There might not be the coffee, all the coffee that we need in 2020, 2030. BMW might have problems to get actually access to the land that you need for your gigafactories. You can't have a home insurance in California. This thing is real, so, and we start accepting that. And now the question actually has been, if we wanted to protect ourselves for that, how could we actually do that? And if we, and that sort of has been also driving us with our work that we do at the Land Banking Group, where we try actually to be part of what, in a way, what Sandrine and Per and Johan talked about a moment. Is there actually an opportunity to redefine nature from a cost into wealth, that we actually, rather than paying a penalty for use it, that we have an interest to hold a net long position on nature capital and positive outcomes. And very practically, we ask ourselves the question, is it actually possible to give every pixel of the planet an ecological passport with regard to its biodiversity, water, soil, and carbon storage? So we call it a nature capital account. And is it actually possible to use that nature capital account as an underlying, as a collateral for the emission of nature service agreements, where you actually can reward every land steward on the planet who take care every morning with all the millions of land use decisions that we take square meter by square meter, day by day, everywhere on the planet, so that we can reward them for the service that they render. And then, could we actually turn these payments into assets? Could we put them onto our balance sheet? Because it's not just a bit of accounting. I think this is a huge step. That's the step in which nature sort of turns from a cost into an asset, into something that we hold as value. And I think that's what nature is. 85% of you have nature as a screensaver. Just think of that. It's an interesting thought. I think we have to bring our intuitive and our economic definition of wealth back together, and rather than penalizing ourselves, and I'm also thinking of the convoys, the farming convoys, and I'm thinking of the political arena in which we currently are. I think there's very little space and capacity for us actually to accept more penalties. I think the trick we have to play on ourselves is to be part of a revolution that actually accepts nature or sees nature as something that you want to be invested in, and that sees nature as an asset. And it's insetters, it's offsetters, and now in the modern world we call them contributors. It's insurers, you talked about the ARTAL, it's investors who start seeing that there is actually a value in holding a long position on nature capital.
So now we've heard that there are ways to invest in nature, but what does the business world say so far? Thomas, can you maybe tell us what BMW would say to this?
Absolutely. I mean, I can directly add on what Martin has been saying, because we are right in the middle of taking a really thorough look at what the contribution of nature can be to meeting our climate objectives outside our value chain. We have been, I must say, that extremely restrictive in that regard so far. So all our commitments we have are all about reducing the impact within the value chain. The question is for the very last pieces of the equation. what can you do outside of what you are responsible for yourself. We have not used wood certificates, for example, as BMW, and we are questioning at the moment what are the options that are more credible, more impactful, more reliable than what is on the market today, exactly as you have described it. But the way more important aspect is what happens for our product itself. And to put that into perspective, on the one hand, we will see over the next years our carbon footprint being dominated by our supply chain. So the days where the carbon account of a car maker was about tailpipe emissions will go down, and the impact of the value chain will go up. And it will dominate our CO2 footprint. Also because electric vehicles per se have a higher energy demand than combustion engine cars. And at the same time, we churn out 5 million tons of stuff to our customers. This is the direct mass that we sell to people. And there is a multiple of that in terms of indirect resource consumption. And presumably there is only a small number of minerals which do not end up in a car somehow. So there is a huge relevance of the carbon impact of the steel, the plastic, the aluminum, the gold, the platinum, the lithium, the nickel that goes into a car. And here we are facing a challenge. Over the last years, we have developed, I think, a reliable nomenclature and infrastructure for managing carbon. So we have clear targets for each and every new product that we develop. What is the maximum footprint it may have in its making? We can allocate these tons per car to tons per steel, per plastic, per battery. We can integrate the CO2 target figure into our agreements with ThyssenKrupp, for example. And then we negotiate this as being part of what we require from our suppliers and what we pay them. And to the extent we succeed, we can be held accountable. We can add up what we achieved on a yearly basis. And we will share that with everybody, with our shareholders, with the stakeholders, with our customers. So that is the easy part. But we don't have that for biodiversity. There is no currency today, no single denominator. So managing the impact by saying, you are a purchasing manager, your role is to achieve a quantitative target. That's the challenge we are facing. And a final remark, very clearly, this does not mean to wait until we have the methods out there. And I know that there is important work being done. In the meantime, there's one thing we can do. We can reduce our primary resource demand by having more circularity, by recycling more, by ramping up the share of stuff that has been something else before. And that's what is part of our sustainability strategy.
That sounds really great, but I believe you can also start investing in a voluntary biodiversity credit. And I think that the costs are becoming more and more measurable. It has been one of the greatest challenges for investing in biodiversity, that there are no credits. It's so hard to measure in the first place. And rePlanet is one of the pioneers that has really progressed substantially. Tim, can you present the way you approach biodiversity credits and measuring biodiversity?
Okay. Hi, I'm Tim Coles. I don't have time to go into the detail of how we do how you can measure.
You can use the remaining time, because I think we can't go through a second round of questions.
Okay then. Okay, we started basically with a question: is how are you going to try and plug that $700 billion gap that's needed on an annual basis? And the interesting thing was there's already more than that being spent on climate every year. And if you converted some of that, or most of that, into nature-based solutions instead of funding wind farms or avoided loss schemes, then you could make a huge difference, not just to climate, but you could also include biodiversity in that. And all of that needs basically a unit of currency, as you were talking about. And I'm a professional ecologist. I've spent years doing this sort of stuff in the field. So when all this started, we formed a massive consultation group of interest around the world to look at how you could develop a system that could be used anywhere. And the basic principle behind it was, how do you look at a consumer price index? That's a basket of goods and services that everybody prices up each year, and you use that to quantify inflation. Every country's got a completely different basket of goods and services, though. So they should, because that's what they're buying. So why don't you use the same approach for conservation? Why don't you have a basket of metrics that reflects the conservation objectives of what you're trying to do? So if you're trying to protect a coral reef in Indonesia from bomb fishing and cyanide fishing, use rugosity, number of holes and nooks and crannies. Coral cover, species richness and abundance of herbivorous fish, same for piscivorous fish, and species richness and biomass of commercially exploited invertebrates. So if each of those metrics improved after a few years, you'd say, yeah, that reef is getting better. But you try using that on a German arable farm that wants to rewild. I mean, it's useless. You need a completely different set of metrics. You need things like soil invertebrates and breeding birds and higher plants and so forth. So what you're essentially doing is selecting a basket of metrics that overall reflect what you're trying to achieve, and then you quantify those at time 0 and then as time goes on. And you look not just at species richness, you rank them according to their conservation value and their relative abundance, because you're looking for an increase in abundance over time. And the increase in each of those metrics, the median value of that multiplied by hectares, gives you the number of biodiversity units of gain. Those are not credits. If you want to get credits, you're going to need someone to independently verify that. And that's where the Biodiversity Futures Initiative comes in, independent group of academics, and they tear your data apart and they say, yes, you have got a 30% gain in biodiversity across 1,000 hectares or whatever. And that then allows you to either sell your carbon with quantified biodiversity co-benefits, which increases the price of the carbon, or you can issue separate credits if you want to. And for that, you go to some organization like Nomica, for example. And what they do is they will monetize 80% of the claim. The other 20% is a buffer. 80% is then monetized as units of a 1% gain per hectare and issued as biodiversity credits. And at rePlanet, the way we fund, we've got 23 projects around the world that are being funded from carbon and biodiversity credits alone. So that's a total of 19 million carbon credits and 15 million biodiversity credits. And all of this is not expensive. So, for example, if you involve local people to help set traps, to help take photographs of quadrats, the expensive bit of having an ecologist is sending them to the site. If you can get the data sent to them, then it's a much more cost-efficient way of being able to do it. So, for example, we run biodiversity surveys, baselining, in a position that you can send the data independent peer review for 5 metrics for £10,000. So the whole cost of this is coming down massively, partly because you can use a lot of modern MRV techniques, but also because you can combine it with traditional techniques by utilizing local manpower on site. And as you all know, if you travel around the world, local people in general are pretty keen on their own wildlife. They'd like to do something about it if they can find an income to be able to do that. So we see, it is all doom and gloom at the moment. There's no doubts about that. We need to do something positive to fix it. And if we can get a measure of quantified biodiversity gain, so when you invest in something, you might be investing for climate, why don't you quantify the biodiversity gains as well? Because that could be done on a cost-effective basis now.
Thank you very much for this answer. I think one of the central problems is that emissions are the difference of climate carbon credits and biodiversity credits is that you can't offset biodiversity, because if biodiversity is lost, it's gone, and you can't just say, okay, here we replace it in another site, like with emissions. But would you like to add something, Martin, to this?
Isn't it one of the learnings that we have done recently, and that that the space for compensation is getting less? And by the way, we are in Germany. We are in the country of Martin Luther. I think so far we have been looking at nature at something where if you do harm on the one hand, you have to deliver an equivalent compensation on the other. We call that equivalence market. That served us very well at a moment where there were ample emissions or ample land budgets still available. We have run out of them.
Exactly.
And that's why the whole concept of compensation needs to be rethought and potentially replaced by a concept of contribution or investment into remediation, which appeals much more to the human soul and to the human brain, because we don't want to be penalized. We don't want to compensate. We want to have wealth. We want to participate. Yeah? And nature and attribution rights to nature actually easily meet that criteria that we apply to other types of assets where we also hold attribution rights. By the way, gold does not deliver us an immediate dividend. Gold is a store of value. Nature, with its scarcity, nature capital, is a store of value. So
increasing value.
Yeah,
yes.
I deeply hold this idea and this hope that we actually can move from a world where we go from towards asset-backed, nature-backed contracts, where it's easier actually to have a bilateral contractual relationship over the ecosystem services that you or Christof deliver, than that we have nature-backed assets, than that we have equitable nature-backed securities. And in the end, the big dream would be to have nature-backed currencies. Why not live in a world where, why not have a Bretton Woods 2.0 where we define nature capital as the ultimate collateral for the way in which we do our monetary policy? And that then would be the step into a world of nature-backed prosperity 2.0. Nature is so much more correlated with our human well-being than gold or greenbacks are. That, by the way, would also be, from an economics point of view, a much cheaper way to manage than to do it with all the subsidies, with the penalties, and with the compensation requirements, which might create what we are seeing on the streets right now.
We've run out of time, but it shows the need to continue this discussion. And next DLD, which is going to be, Steffi, where are you? Biodiversity DLD. And please, rePlanet and Land Banking Group, you need to speak to BMW and convince them to invest in nature now.
Yeah, I think that everyone has to understand, without nature, we wouldn't be there in the future. Now, I think economy needs nature, nature doesn't need economy. Now, so that is very fundamental to understand. Now, so we all will not be here again in some decades if we don't get it right now. And this is why I think it's important for every, not only that one, now, but for every economy conference now to integrate fundamentally biodiversity, because that's the base of everything now. And even the European community 5 years ago mentioned that 80% of the SDGs now will not be delivered now when we don't get the biodiversity loss right now.
Absolutely, and that's one of our critical challenges. There is an enormous lack of awareness about this issue. We talked to so many leaders that had no clue about the collapse of biodiversity. So we need to get it into our heads and start acting, because it's a challenge as big as the climate change challenge. Thank you very much for your attention, and sorry for taking longer.